Son. Good evening. I'd like to call the September 13th Board of Ed meeting to order and ask everyone to stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If I could get a motion on the agenda.
So moved.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? All opposed? All in favor? Then we'll go for the opposed. Carried. Thank you. Next, we have the public hearing for the Code of Conduct. Any comments or?
I would just say of note, on the public, or on the Code of Conduct, the only change really is the date.
Okay. Move on to the approval of the minutes from the August 9th meeting. If I could get a motion. Thanks, Robin. A second?
Second.
Thanks, Sarah. Any comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Board of Education report. I'd like to start out with a quick comment. Having attended opening day along with my colleagues from the board for all staff, also having had the opportunity to walk the buildings on the first day of school, I just want to say how absolutely wonderful it is to have everybody back in our buildings engaged in doing school as it was meant to be. The energy is palpable and exciting to see everyone doing their thing. With that, we'll just go through our meetings that we have. Board leadership next meeting is November 2nd. Executive committee is October 5th. David, the information exchange is September 14th. Tomorrow. Yeah, look at that. Labor relations, Emily, is 9/21. Legislative, Sarah, I know you have a report for us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, so the Monroe County School Board Association Legislative Committee held our first meeting last week. I have the privilege of co-chairing the committee this year with Mark Kokonovich from BOCES 1 and Brighton. Very excited to be working with this group and representing Pittsford in this way. We're jumping right in, first looking to create our list of legislative priorities for the year that we'll be advocating for as a county. We came up with at least 11 items just in a quick discussion amongst the committee. And we're hoping that we can put together a complete list in October after allowing everyone time to review with their boards. So I'll get in touch with the group soon to see if there's any additional items that we should consider. There's also an email that everyone should have gotten at this point from Nancy. I think last night she sent that out with a survey. So that will help us to determine the direction that we head into. And also there's questions on there about trips to Albany and trying to get a sense of how everyone feels about taking those trips. There's also a request to serve on a subcommittee to review position papers. If anyone has seen those on the website, it's there's several of them and they are a bit outdated, so we're looking to form a committee to review those and update them. Something new this year, rather than Nancy sending out the minutes after each committee meeting, she's now posting everything to the website. If you haven't checked out the new website, it's wonderful. They've spent a lot of time working on that this summer, and there's just a lot of great information on there. Everyone should have their own login for that. If you don't, or something's not right with that, just send Nancy or Amy an email, and they can correct that for you. So then rather than in the past, we've always sent out the minutes, forwarded those on through email. So rather than doing that this year, if everyone could just check the website at your convenience, that's all on there a day or two after the meeting. We talked a lot about the advocacy trips for December and March. We'd really like to get back to the way things used to be in taking those trips, but it's looking like the December trip will probably be Zoom again, just with the elections and timing of everything. It's probably more likely to be on Zoom. Hoping that we can get some FaceTime with our legislators this fall, maybe even that December date that we had, to continue to build the relationships and work to advocate for our countywide issues. The March trip to Albany is still on at this point. It's typically the first week of March, so I'll keep everyone posted on that one as we learn some more info on it. Legislative breakfast date is set for Saturday, February 4th, so mark your calendars for that one. Also, just a reminder about the law conference next week. Ted, I'm sure you'll be mentioning that as well, but September 22nd, so you can register right through the website if you haven't already done so. And next meeting is October 5th.
Thank you, Sarah. Anybody have any questions for Sarah? Okay. This next steering committee meeting is 11/9. Under other meetings, I just would also mention, Sarah mentioned the law conference. I sent a link for everybody to register. I highly encourage. It's a great morning. A lot of good information is shared, a lot of relevant current events as far as the legal side goes. So just show of hands who's planning to go at this point. Anyone? Great.
I'm waiting.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. Dates to remember. 10/5, schools closed for Yom Kippur. On 10/6, we have a board visit. We're going to be touring Park Road. Quick show of hands, who's going to be able to make that? Great. It would be nice to see everybody there. On 10/10, schools will be closed for Columbus Day and Indigenous People Day. And also on the 18th is our next regularly scheduled board meeting, and that's the 18th of October. With that, we'll move on to the financial report. Welcome, Mike Vespi. Welcome to your first meeting.
Thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Mike, if I could just pause for a second.
Absolutely.
So Mike just started yesterday. And here he is at the board meeting giving his financial report. But I do want to share with the community how refreshing the last day and a half has been with Mike. Normally I wouldn't share our private conversations in public, but I'm going to share parts of them. One of the things, we were working through an issue, and his comment was, I don't understand how anyone could not be happy being in school and working with students and coming to an environment like this. And so his goal, one of his goals, is to make sure the departments that he serves and the people around him certainly appreciate the goodwill and pleasure of working with the people around them. The other thing I really appreciated was when we talked about budget, he talked about how the budget is not the business office's budget, it's the student's budget. And we need to be very student-centered, and if there's a cost, that he'll be very transparent about where we need to get it from and how we're going to make it up. But legitimate things for kids need to be a priority. And then we got into potential or projected very soon capital project, concerns about the tax cap, bus driver shortage, and he was still smiling, and he showed up today. So welcome, Mike, and good luck with your report this evening.
Well, thanks so much. I appreciate that. So just briefly, obviously there's a policy on the disposal of district property. So these are some items that were recommended. Very basic floor scrubber, extractor, pool heater, a booster heater actually, and adult strollers. So those won't go to auction. They'll just be disposed of. They're obsolete. I think the larger item on the agenda tonight is the refund, the refunding of the bond. So,
Mike, let's just
stop and get a motion? Okay. Thanks so much. Super, thanks. So, this is probably the bigger item on the agenda is this, this bond refund. So these are bonds that originally were part of the 2002 project, the last really large capital project. Those bonds were refunded previously in 2012. Obviously, Mr. Kenny did a great job in outlining the details in the memo. But essentially, these bonds can be refunded after a 10-year period, and it represents a significant savings. So if you think back to 2012, where interest rates were, they're still, even though they've bounced back recently, they're still at historic low levels. So as a net result, those bonds for the next 10 years would average around 3.8%, and they're lowered to about 2.3%. So overall, in the district's debt service, there's a savings of $1.9 million. And so there's a real opportunity, over the next 10 years to save that money. So this was initiated by the district's fiscal advisor, recommended, reviewed by the attorney, and of course you can see the backup in terms of the due diligence that's done, all regulated by the State Education Department, and has to show a savings in order to move forward and present to the Board of Education.
Can I get a motion on the refunding? Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Robin. All those, any comments or questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is the potential purchase of property. Again, a very interesting opportunity. You wouldn't normally walk into your first board meeting and have a conversation about this. Fortunately, in my previous experience, I actually, went through a purchase of property. And so this situation has been under review since, I went back in the file, since June of 2014. So there's an opportunity to purchase this property. What the board is being asked for tonight is really, as part of the process, is permission to move forward with the legal process in terms of negotiations, but also before a property can be purchased for a school district, you have to have a fair value appraisal. And so, the law is very clear in terms of that, and that's part of the negotiations process. So, I think, on the second part of the resolution, items 2, 3, and 4 really are the most significant aspects, where you've got to do that. You've got to look at the fair market appraisal. You've got to look at any contingencies as part of the sale. And then there has to be a public referendum. And again, I know Mr. Kenny did an excellent job outlining the background of this. The taxpayers have to approve it, and the funding source has to be identified. And certainly there's two ways to do that. One is through the use of the capital reserve. The other one would be to just put it on and use fund balance from an existing budget as part of the budget process. So there's windows, to acquire the property on a potential capital project. So we'll see, how that plays. And again, I know the board is well versed in terms of that, or you can do it as part of the budget vote. So this is really the next step in that process, and it does not obligate anything at this point. It's just the next part of the due diligence process.
Okay, thank you. Can we get a motion on the potential purchase? Thanks, Jeff. Second?
Second.
Thanks, Dave. Any discussion?
Is there, just a quick question, is there also an environmental piece that goes along with this?
There is, as part of that review process. And I'd actually mentioned to Mr. Pirro that, it would also be, for the potential use of the property, there would be, the seeker process, if there was any use of the process. So both on the purchase, there's an environmental review, and then in the future, if depending on the use of the property, as part of a capital project, there would be, what are we going to do with it, and what's the impact on the environment through the seeker law.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you. Next.
Okay, the next is the auction of equipment, late arrival. Appreciate the board's cooperation in terms of this piece, and it's simply it's transportation and maintenance equipment. And the realization was that with the change in board schedule, and I think in the change of business official, that there wasn't going to be a board meeting before the auction. So we really appreciate the flexibility of the board to get this item on the agenda, and we'll try to avoid that going forward. But it's important based on the replacement plan and the process that's been in the district, from my understanding, for a few years now, to bring this equipment to auction.
Very good. A motion on the auction of equipment. Thank you, Sarah. Second? Thanks, Emily. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
And finally is the bid award for bus parts, as outlined in the attached information.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Vespi, and welcome. So moving on to Mr. Clark.
Good evening. First, for your consideration, we have the professional staff report. There you'll see 9 certificated staff appointments, 1 certificated staff change in FTE. We have 19 school-related professional appointments, 4 school-related professional change in status from part-time to full-time, 5 certificated staff resignations, 9 school-related professional resignations, and then we also have the revised fall coaching salaries and volunteers with those changes highlighted for you.
Thank you very much. A motion on the professional staff report?
So moved.
Thank you, Renee. Second. Thanks, Robin. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you. Next for your consideration is the support staff report. We have 7 clerical and school aid appointments, 1 school aid resignation, 1 bus aid termination, 1 cleaner appointment, 2 custodial resignations. We have 1 cleaner resignation for retirement with 13.6 years of service and 1 food service appointment.
Very good. Can I have a motion, please? Thanks, Robin. Second. Thanks, Renee. Any discussion, any questions?
Real quick question?
Yes.
How are we looking at filling in positions in general? Because there are other districts, as you know, around us that are really struggling, so how is that looking for us?
Our greatest needs are continuous in bus driver shortages. Just spoke with Carla Grove, our Director of Transportation. She has a couple of onboards this week, so that's good. I think what will help with that too is finishing up the contract negotiations, so that will be appealing to people as they look for positions. The other areas, we're bolstering our lunch and recess monitors, which is really good. You'll see that in the report. And then always with paraprofessionals, CSE assigned paras, we're still a few short within the building, so, but we're getting applications in every day. But at our regional meetings, I mean, that was a common thread that there's needs throughout. Thankfully, for certificated staff, we're in really good shape, but support staff, we're always in need, and bus drivers, we're still about 30 short.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions?
Any of our students 18 or older? Anyone want to drive a bus in your free periods? Okay.
Perfect. All right.
All in favor? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm getting there.
That was my fault.
I was processing that. So, all in favor? Any opposed? Any bus drivers? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Ms. Katea.
Good evening. We have 2 new foreign exchange agencies that would like to be a part of our approved list of agencies that work with us to be able to bring students to the district through our foreign exchange program. So they've gone through our internal process, and we have them for you this evening for final review for you to consider.
Perfect. Can I get a motion on that, please? Thanks, Sarah. Second? Thanks, Emily. Any discussion, questions? Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Ms. Woods, Special Education Report.
Good evening. Our first item is a request for approval of an additional parent member for the Committee on Special Education.
A motion? Emily, thank you. Second?
Second?
Thanks, Renee. Any discussion, any questions? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried.
Thank you. And the CSE and CPSE recommendations are all on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Superintendent Pirro's report.
Thank you, Ted. There will be a need for an executive session this evening regarding current investigation / employment of a particular individual.
We have a motion. Sarah, second? Jeff, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you.
I also just want to acknowledge donations in the amount of close to $1,900 for our summer enrichment theater program. So thank you to all of those that contributed. It's certainly going to a great cause. Do have a few words about our opening and a little foreshadowing regarding our next board meeting. So Ted, you set the stage for this, but this past week in school, starting with the very first day of school, Melanie and Ted and Robin and I together went to all 9 schools. I know Shana and others also visited schools. It was refreshing beyond belief. What we saw was an energy that I would say was easily pre-COVID energy. There was an excitement that was pre-COVID excitement. What we saw were things like staff out in the hallways helping students nonstop. We saw getting to know you activities in homerooms to establish a sense of trust and trusted adult within the classroom and within the community. I saw assemblies focused on the importance of citizenship and living our mission. I watched lessons that focused on rigor and challenging students how to think critically. I saw community circles where students shared their excitement and their apprehensions about being back to school. And so it was really done with a level of high expertise and care, welcoming our students back. And can't thank our parents for having them ready and our staff for their level of preparedness enough. Our students and our staff are second to none, and I think we have to acknowledge we are amazing. We have so much to be proud of in our district, and as superintendent, I get the pleasure to see firsthand all the good that happens in our schools every day. Being in school today, however, compared to when many of us were in school is actually very different. So as adults, when we think about what it was like when we were in school and compare it to where we are today, it's a whole different game. In some instances, a lot better, and in some instances, I think a lot harder. Areas that I think that we've improved tremendously in over the years is understanding the necessity of the importance of getting to know our students, to better understand what our students are carrying with them as they enter our doors, what their insecurities are, what their fears are, what their worries are, so that we can support them, so they can become better human beings, so they can feel good about themselves, so that their minds could be open to learning. We are fully vested in knowing the students that we serve. We want to know about the students that are in front of us. We want every child to feel comfortable with identifying a trusted adult, or ideally multiple trusted adults. We want every child to live a career at Pittsford where all things DASA related are things of the past. Being deliberate about knowing every child and providing them with affirmation and comfort is a significant change, I think, from when we were in school. This is something every member of our community should be proud of and thankful for, especially knowing that every child is different, and we will always do our best to meet every single child's individual needs. That's the good part. The hard part, I think, in school today, compared to when many of us were in school, is that when we were in school and went home, we could just go home and go on with the second part of our lives. When our students go home, they're often not disconnected from social groups, and they're often not disconnected from what happened during the school day because of that, and that makes it tough. The social media outlet allows students to see and read things about themselves well beyond the end of the school day. So I ask for you to please, and this is a message to parents, but for the students that are here tonight too, think about the moral imperative we have on being kind on social media. What a different place this would be, what a different world it would be if we can use social media as a platform for doing great things and for being kind to one another. And I will often say that life is hard enough without having the additional stress of what people are saying about you when they're hiding behind a screen. So I think that all of us, especially adults, need to practice responsible social media use. I ask our adults in our community to challenge ourselves on the importance of putting our own phones down and finding healthy ways to interact with others. I ask us all to find a way to slow down. And we've been going nonstop. We've been on this wheel for almost 3 years with COVID. We need to breathe, take a breath. We need to gather our thoughts. We need to think about what's important in our lives. We need to find positivity. We need to support and help one another. And I ask you to think about all of those things before you think about posting. Same with our students. In the event anyone hears something concerning about schools, please reach out to us and get clarification before throwing something out there and saying, this is what happened in this classroom, or this is what my child came home with, without understanding maybe what the directions were beforehand. Those that post things first, without going through that fact-finding process, are responsible for spreading rumors, which is exactly what we teach our students not to do. So I just ask our adults in our community to model the concept of both kindness, fact-finding, interacting with the school, and not spreading rumors. We do have a who to call form in the event you see or hear something concerning from our schools. Please contact the person closest to the issue, and we will address and or investigate all concerns, because we want that partnership. And if we need to do something better, we want to know that. But we'd rather hear it from you personally than versus social media where things spread. Our staff work hard. Our staff are incredibly talented, and our students are incredibly amazing. So again, I'm just going to ask for the courtesy, the civility, to get back to talking to people, contacting our school, being our partners, instead of posting and trying to prove a point instead of having conversation. So that's my PSA. Social media can be really good. It can also be really dangerous. It could be very supportive, or it can be deconstructive. So just let's be our best selves in our community, please. We have a lot of potential to be even better every day, and our kids deserve it, our staff deserve it, and our community deserves that. So interestingly, there's a lot of things that are happening in schools that across the country that are on national TV, local news. They may involve textbooks. They may involve instructional materials. They may involve controversial issues. So know that in schools, we have to do the best that we can to be apolitical. In schools, we do believe that controversial issues should be discussed, but they need to be discussed in a balanced way. And so when we talk about controversial issues, they need to be scholarly, they need to be objective, they need to be balanced so the diverse views make a topic, so the diverse views can be seen on both sides. We need to find a way to be able to talk through and teach our students how to talk through things that are controversial. So when I use the word controversial, probably the best language that I've seen defines it as questions, subjects, or problems which can create a difference in opinion. They can include issues which may have political, social, environmental, or personal impacts on students and or the wider community, locally, nationally, or internationally. And in schools, we do our best to teach students not what to think, but how to think. And we want to teach students how to think critically. We want students to be able to work through controversial matters. We want them to be able to develop thoughts. We want them to be able to think critically. And at the same time, we expect all of that to happen in a way that is compassionate, empathetic, clever, witty, humorous, genuine. We want our students to find their way through problem solving, during controversial issues, which is good. The hard part, I think, is that sometimes it becomes so emotional as adults. If a controversial issue touches a value, a family value, or something political, or something along those lines. And know that we are sensitive to that. We do value parents and their values and their beliefs. We do believe in parents as partners. So we are trying to find a way to strike the balance for parents to have a dialogue with us in the event they object to something. So instead of, again, going nowhere, which is social media and posting their concerns about something, what's a scholarly way, a civil way to say to the school, we really question why you're doing this, or we question what you're doing. So I'll be bringing forward to the board during our next meeting a new policy, an amended policy to our current policy around objection to instructional materials that will also add to it the word controversial. So instructional and controversial materials, and a process for people to voice their concern, and a process for us to do a review. So thinking about what Pittsford means to me, and when I've seen Pittsford at our best, we're a community of learners, we're a community of people that support each other, and all of these controversial matters have the potential to divide, but they also have the potential to bring us together through discourse, and sometimes have to agree to disagree, but to at least respect one another in that process. So this will be an ongoing project, but that will be presented to the board in our next board meeting. The last thing I have, just as a note, is how much our schools are a source of pride, and how much we really want and strive our students and staff and families to be excited to be here, to attach their name to our school district and feel that it represents all that's good. Our district represents goodwill, hard work, diversity, acceptance, rigor, all that we feel is in the best interest of our kids in our community. So I ask for your help this year in championing all the good that takes place in our schools. We have so much to be thankful for. We have so much to have pride in. And there's also a lot of little things we can do better. But instead of focusing on all those little things, let's take time to acknowledge all the great things and the people that are working so hard to make your children and yours and our collective experience second to none. So as I start this new year, I want to thank you for entrusting us with your children. I want you to know that we are dedicated more than ever to provide a sense of rigor, care, compassion, love, empathy, so that our children can all be successful in the future. Thank you.
As many of you or most of you are aware, we've made some changes to our public comment. So what I'd like to do real quick, I'm not going to read this at every meeting, but I feel that I should read it at this meeting. The Pittsford Board of Education values transparency in the public comments made during its meetings. As such, the Pittsford Board of Education provides this agenda item at its regular meetings. Board of Education meetings are not public forums. Rather, they are business meetings held in public where dialogue is not normally conducted with audience members. The purpose of this agenda item is for the board to receive respectful and constructive feedback, opinions, and information from district residents. Given the amount of public comment, and to be fair to our residents, privilege of the floor will only be permitted to those who reside in the district. Comments are taken under advisement by the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Schools. Respect and civility are required during these meetings, particularly as we have students routinely attending as part of their attending as part of their coursework, as evidenced tonight. Comments should be in reference to an interest or topic, not an individual. Each speaker will have the floor for no more than 3 minutes, and yielding time amongst speakers is not permitted. The board president reserves the right to limit the total amount of speaking time. For speakers who do not follow meeting decorum protocols, the speaker's privilege to use the floor will no longer be recognized by the Board of Education. Those planning to address the board during public comment agenda item must fill out an online submission form that can be made out in advance rather than filling out an index card at the meeting. Only those that submit an online form are eligible for public comment. The online submission form will become available 5 days before the regular Board of Education meeting date. Comments must be submitted no later than noon on the day of the board meeting. The first 10 residents to submit the online submission form will be notified by email and have the opportunity to read their comment at the meeting. Or, if they choose, it will be read aloud on their behalf. The Board of Education values feedback. Anyone wanting to contact the board may do so at any time by way of email. With that, we have some submissions tonight. And first, I would call up Catherine Doyle. Good evening. If you would, just state your address for the record.
Round Trail Drive.
Thank you.
I don't think I've ever been first before. Oh, my God.
Congratulations.
So, next week is Banned Book Week. Read a banned book, kids. So, I'd like to speak in strong support of our PCSD teacher librarians tonight. Our teacher librarians do an excellent job developing age-appropriate resources that serve our students. All our children deserve to see themselves reflected in our library collections. As book challenges increase, I invite you to support our teacher librarians and recommend that parents do what my mother did with me and what I did with my daughter. Look at what your children are reading and discuss it with them. The second thing, I know it's early, but I imagine, and this might be a surprise to you, Mike, that we're going to have something on the budget about new buses. 14 years experience in this leads me to think that. And so one thing that I'd like you to consider this year is making a move to adopt electronic vehicles for at least some of our new bus purchases. We've seen with this summer, the climate is going down drastically. We're one of the richest districts in Monroe County. I think we can be a leader in this and start the economy of scale needed to bring down the prices of these buses. And Penfield found the state funding to do this last year, and Assemblymember Lunsfield, as a Thornell Road parent, might be able to help us with getting state funding ourselves this year. And lastly, and I didn't write this down, Deb, I'd like to thank Mrs. Carpenter for her help in navigating this new process and tell you how much I hate writing my comments out beforehand. These are my comments, which I wrote in 5 minutes between a meeting, and I've marked them up extensively because I don't like writing down comments. If I wanted to write down comments, I wouldn't have shown up here tonight. I don't know why this is, and I'd like to hear a rationale about why you need to read what I write beforehand. And I think one improvement you can make to this is I'd like a time when you would hear back whether or not we're accepted to speak at the meeting so we can arrange our lives easier. although you gave me plenty of notice, and I thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would just say that a major part of the reason for writing things down before is so people can gather their thoughts, read them, and make sure that their thoughts are aligned to what our goals are for public comment, and making sure students and staff and parents' names and scenarios aren't discussed, because one or two comments, and it's happened before, have resulted in people not able to speak at public comments, and it's also resulted in students and families being harmed. So I would hope that it's a small sacrifice to ask people to write out their thoughts in advance. It's the same thing. You can come in. You don't have to read word by word, but we want to make sure that our kids are protected, our staff are protected, and our community members are protected. And then we will assess as we go on. Thank you.
Next, Meredith Graham.
Good evening, Meredith Graham, 21 Northfield Gate. I'm here to talk about routes to school. So there's a major bus driver shortage. I think we all can agree. And I think we have to start thinking about how we get kids to school and from school in a more creative way. One of the ways is walking and biking. And I feel strongly that an outdoor time right before school starts where you're a little bit active, whether you're walking or biking, scootering, whatever it is, actually helps you learn. There's been a lot of studies out there that shows that if you do recess, like in between lessons, you find the students, perform better. So, that's even before school starts. So that's like a bonus. You wouldn't even have to spend precious school time if you could get more kids to walk to school. As you know, the sidewalks in the town there are a lot, and there are a lot of places that can walk to school safely right now. I would encourage the board to consider finding someone who could champion safe routes to school for Pittsford, right? Really focus on how do we get more kids walking? How do we make it so those parents are comfortable and they aren't walking along Mendon Center Road, because no way, right? That's too fast. And so that's the first thing. And part of that is school start times. So again, I've spoken about this before, but if you switch the two school start times, you're going to also see there's more light available for walking to school, especially for the older kids. And, perhaps you could consolidate buses if you ended up doing that, because you'd have more kids walking, and you could end up, doing the bus run less, having fewer buses. So that's my basic point, is that safe routes to school. And I really think that the person who does this should be somebody who isn't also trying to make sure the safety once they're in school is great. Do you know what I mean? Which I also respect, and I think that's great, right? You need to have a safe school, single point of entry. All of this work that's been done is great. But I feel like the person who is doing that is going to not be at odds with the idea of getting kids to school, do you know what I mean, by any way other than busing. Does that make sense? So I feel like it's at odds. So I'd hope that you could find somebody to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Dorothy Bausch-Barker. She's not going to be here. I will go ahead and read her comment. Hers is relative. It's on. It's on. Her topic is also school start times. And she says, research has shown that school start times for middle school and high school students are much too early, and that it affects not only students' academic performance, but also their health. I understand that it is a hard task to adjust what we are used to, but it is important for health and success of our children. I suggest that all school start times be moved back by some amount, say half hour or an hour. Do not switch the elementary students to earlier. That is not an appropriate solution. Moving all students back will also make it safe for students who are walking, biking, driving, or waiting for buses in the early morning, which can be dark and cold. It will also help retain much-needed bus drivers, many of whom are not interested in waking up so unreasonably early and driving to work through unplowed, slippery, dark roads. My son's bus driver told us directly that he was changing jobs to avoid the early mornings. We can do hard things. Please work again on moving all school start times to later. That was the comment. That is all of our comments.
If I could just comment to that.
Yes.
I love that idea. I really do. If there's an ideal, that's the ideal, is to move everyone's start time up an hour. As we look at different models that we've seen in the area, by moving secondary an hour later, the K through 5 students are getting on the bus before 7 a.m., so 6 something in the morning. And that's pretty early. And for students that are at the bus stop, they're at the bus stop at 6:45 in the dark, in the winter, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to speak for the district that is an hour in advance at the secondary level, but the science behind it is right. The practical part of the K through 5 kids that are impacted is very difficult. So trying to find that right balance is going to be critical. I do agree with that last comment. The ideal from child care, before care, after care, and from health and science, starting an hour later for everyone would be, or at least on the same time, would be great. A big part of it is connected to transportation. So as Meredith alluded to, we are somewhere around 35 bus drivers short this year, which is not an anomaly, but it puts us very, very thin and limits our direction or options moving forward with things. So trying to focus on the bus driver part first, and then be able to make that obstacle be obsolete as we process other parts of the equation. So I do believe that a new contract and doing some creative things will attract more bus drivers to Pittsford. So thank you for those, for the public comments, everyone.
Okay. Could I get a motion for adjournment, please? Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Sarah. Good night, everybody. Next meeting is October 18th. Oh, all in favor? Almost got out of here. Any opposed? Good night, everybody. Our next meeting is October 18th. Thank you.
If anyone needs signatures, come on up.